I am Steve Wood, recovered alcoholic. Welcome to Big Book Compendium. Um, so we've covered about everything we can imagine about alcoholism. Doctor's opinion, Bill's story, their solution, more about alcoholism. And I think we could say we know the difference between a hard drinker and a real alcoholic, and the moderate drinker and all that stuff like that. We got that down, and we know the insanity of the first drink. We discussed that strange mental blank spots and the restless, irritable, and discontent that comes to us when we're dry. And of course, we dissected the allergy and especially the obsession as deeply as we possibly could. But we know we are powerless over, alcohol. Powerless because of the allergy obsession. And so it's time to talk about power. And we'll now begin our journey away from just a symptom of alcohol into the spiritual solution. I'm going to read something starting off it's from Time magazine, and I always love this. And it's something that came out like an article, I think it was the New Millennium type thing, but so it came out 20 years ago, 25 years ago, whatever it is. So here it is from Time magazine. The greatest minds in the world, from universities to medical field, government, welfare groups, and even scientists have spent millions of dollars in the attempt to find the cause of alcoholism. Yet no one is able to place their finger on the exact cause. However, it has now become a conscious opinion among those great minds that have attacked the problem that a lack of proper spiritual application on the part of the victim is at least a primary cause. So the solution must be proper spiritual application to overcome it, something Alcoholics Anonymous has said for over 75 years. It's pretty deep. So we're not going to be getting into, we're going to look at spiritual appendix tonight, but first I just want to go to page 45. And we're looking at paragraph 2 on page 45. And this is the way I always open up the spiritual thing, because it just hammers it home. It's so right on. So it says that its main object is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself, which will solve your problem. Now, here's the thing. It does not say, and this is the way a lot of people read it, it does not say the main object of this book is to enable you to find a spiritual solution so you can solve your problem. It's not what it says. A lot of people will think it says that, and that's the way you think about God. We're going to find God so we can still fix this. It doesn't make sense. So if it's, if it said, that if we could solve our problem, then it'd be a self-help program. It's a simple wording, which will solve our problem, your problem, that makes our program a spiritual one and not self-help. So it's a spiritual solution program so we can receive the power we lack. And, people do not understand when people say this is not a program of not drinking. It's a program of finding God. They don't get it. What is it? But the truth is, what is the focus of Alcoholics Anonymous? It's not drinking. Matter of fact, we celebrate time in Alcoholics Anonymous away from drink. It's deemed a success for who has the most time. And even if the person's miserable, even if they're angry, even if they are suffering, this is not about a drinking problem. It's a spiritual problem because we lack the proper power to overcome the drinking problem. It's not all about, this holier God thing and everything like that. It's simple. Some people think when I say it's a spiritual problem, that's what I'm leaning towards 100%. But what I'm really saying here is it's a spiritual problem because we lack power to overcome this drinking problem. So the seeking of that power to overcome alcoholism makes this a spiritual program. So, beginning with today's study and over the course of the next, month, this book is going to show us that God is the nucleus of this program. And our study today does a complete shift, like I said earlier, from the symptom into the solution. From here, it's all about union with God. And with that being said, the core message of life is that there is an absolute truth that is beyond all concepts of belief. And the condition is a simple one. We must seek it. And what we must discover is our true nature, which is whole, sane, limitless, and everlasting. It just flows. And the question is, how do we get there? And Carl Jung called it spiritual conversion. Silkworth called it psychic change, which is the adoption of a new belief system towards God or higher power, whatever you want to call it, that completely differs from the old belief system. That leads to a change in character, wholeness. That wholeness for wholeness is sanity, and that's the psychic change. And so Jung describes that on page 27, what that psychic change looks like, or just call it conversion or whatever you want. So it says on 27 in the middle of the page, it says they appear to be in the nature of huge emotional, and most of the word huge emotional displacements and rearrangements. Now, just that last sentence, displacements means to rid of something, and rearrangements would mean to redo, like when you rearrange your house, right? We're talking about our complete aspect of our emotions here. Ideas, emotions, and attitudes, which were once the guiding forces of the lives of these men, are suddenly cast to one side. So it doesn't say they're coped with or get to know or anything like that, or fake it till you make it. No, it doesn't say anything like that. It says are cast. Step 4 and 5, 4 through 7 is a casting out steps. So they're suddenly cast to one side. And look at, and here's the results of that casting out. In a completely new set of conceptions and motives. That's conceptions means ideas, and motives, which means intentions, begin to dominate them. So our ideas and intentions, new ones, it's not something that's been repainted over and redone and made to look like something new. It's new, something you've never, it's like a new car. You've never experienced it before, brand new. So more about Jung is, in his letter to Bill Wilson, Carl Jung, he wrote a letter to Bill Wilson when describing Rowan Hazard's alcoholism. He said something very interesting. He said Rowan's craving for alcohol was the equivalent of on a low level of a spiritual thirst for wholeness, also known as union with God. And the reason Jung said stuff like that is because his first position was a residential medical assistant at a psychiatric hospital in Zurich, Switzerland, where 23, probably more, % of the patients were alcoholics. So when he was studying alcoholics, he discovered that there was a thirst for some type of wholeness that led the alcoholic to drink. But the wholeness that came from intoxication was a false wholeness. It was an illusion. And because it dissolved, the power dissolved, and then when one dried out, that the alcoholic would wind up being discouraged with life, and even more, leading to seeking more drink. Now, throwing that allergy obsession in there, it goes crazy, right? So we're medicating ourselves because the thirst for wholeness we're trying to find. And so alcoholism becomes a solution. Millions of people do that without consciously knowing it, and they don't have consequences. We can't, because, like I said, the allergy obsession. So the solution works against us. Jung also believed that a radical, as you've probably seen in his story with Rowan, as a radical conversion experience must happen to lead to a deep level of spiritual wholeness, was absolutely necessary for recovery for these people. He called it fun. These occurrences are phenomena. of course, we know AA developed a spiritual path called the 12 steps that leads to wholeness. So it all kind of ties together, interesting. And there's a quote Jung said that I absolutely love. He says, "Show me a drunk and I'll show someone in search of God." And he elaborated that more in one of his books, where he talked about how alcoholics have a thirst for wholeness. They're looking to be complete. And they, the other thing that he used to also say is we feel separated from God, and we feel that separation with alcohol. So let's go to the spiritual appendix on 569 in the 4th edition. I don't know what it is if you have a 3rd edition. I think it's like 567, but 569 in the 4th. So they're going to talk about 2 different types of these spiritual conversions, 2 different types of psychic change, we'll call it, the steps lead to. So in 1941, they did a second printing of the book Alcoholics Anonymous, the 1st edition. So the second printing of the 1st edition, the wording in step 12 was changed. Originally it said, having had a spiritual experience as a result of this, of these steps. They changed it to having had a spiritual awakening. The reason this was done is because many members thought they had to have this sudden, spectacular boom experience like Bill Wilson had, right? And they also added to the printing the spiritual appendix to differentiate the difference between the spiritual experience and the spiritual awakening. So it's vitally important that it's in here to really show us, yes, there is a difference between the 2 of them. And at the time, these words, were unheard of. So the terms spiritual experience and spiritual awakening are used many times in this book. Upon careful reading shows that personality change, I would underline that, personality change sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism has manifested itself among us in many different forms. So what's personality? It's the combination of ideas, beliefs, feelings, emotions, attitudes. That forms our mental behavior, call it our identity, right? So they're saying we receive a change in beliefs, emotions, and feelings. We gain a new identity. And let's see what else it says. It says, yet it is true that our first printing gave many readers the impression, that's why they wrote this, many readers the impression that these personality changes or religious experience must be the nature of sudden and spectacular upheavals. Happily, for everyone, this conclusion is erroneous, and thank God, because it's erroneous means untrue. So he's saying you don't have to have that boom, boom experience. Some of us have. Some of us have. In the first few chapters, a number of suddenly revolutionary changes are described. So we have Bill Wilson's, Carl Jung describes one, Sogworth describes it. You have the guy that's later on in Agnostics, the man who thought he was an atheist. Here also he says, as though it is not our intention to create such an impression, many of these alcoholics have nevertheless concluded that in order to recover, they must acquire an immediate and overwhelming God consciousness, followed by a vast change in feeling and outlook. So God consciousness, what is it? It is the awareness of higher self or God, whatever you want to call it, spirit, whatever your name is. It is the part of the human being, it's the only part of the human being that's capable of exceeding our animal instincts. And that's, we look at our instincts in the 4th step, pride, self-esteem, personal relations, and all that stuff. We'll get more into that when we get to step 4. But the reason that they're saying here is, so God consciousness is a guidance center. So is intuition. And if I don't have that, I'm just going to be trying to fulfill instincts. I'm going to have a want for money, for friends, sex, or whatever it is. And it talks all about that in step 4. So spiritual experience, the way he described it there, sudden revolutionary change immediate and overwhelming God consciousness followed at once by a vast change, feeling, and outlook. Personality change sufficient to bring about recovery. Now, for some, that experience might happen with maybe on step 6, maybe on 9, may happen on 3, might happen before the steps. My point is that if it's before step 4, you still have to conclude with the rest of the program, because I highly recommend it. So this sudden overpowering shift in the God consciousness is a direct result of some type of experience with God, and people call it knowing. A direct experience. How do you know something? That's the question. How do we know something? We know something from experiencing it, right? We only know stuff from experience it. Anything else is a theory. We'll get more into that in a little bit. But this experience it leads to knowing. And that's the thing, leading to a change in character and wholeness, a different outlook on life. Outlook, not in-look, outlook, looking outward. Says among our rapidly growing membership of thousands of alcoholics, such transformations, though frequent, are by no means the rule. Most of our experience are what the psychologist William James calls the educational variety. So now he's talking about the spiritual awakening, because it develops slowly over a period of time. So spiritual awakening is the educational variety, develops slowly over a period of time, personality change to bring about recovery. So spiritual awakening is this gradual shift in the consciousness, leading to it's a new dimension of reality. And it's that new dimension of reality had previously not, is why it's such an awakening. It was unrealized before. And that leads us to change in character and wholeness and a whole different outlook on life. Now, the thing is, with spiritual awakening, when it says gradual shift, that doesn't mean over 9 months. You gotta remember, spiritual experience is like boom. Spiritual awakening can be anywhere from minutes to days to hours after something is, as you start becoming aware. So it's as awareness grows. So here's a result of that awakening. It says, quite often, friends of the newcomer are aware of these differences long before himself. I remember one of my friends who drank, I stayed in contact with after I got sober. I mean, I wasn't afraid of him. Like, I don't know, they tell us that not to go around people, but I wasn't, I went around with them. And we went over to San Francisco, and I was always a hothead in the past. And if someone did something wrong, I would get, very angry, and sometimes even crazier than that. And one day we're in the car and we're supposed to go somewhere to a friend's house, and he gets lost, and he takes the wrong turn. And I'm like, he's like, oh, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. I'm sorry I did that. I didn't mean it. It's like he was almost pleading with me not to go crazy on him. And I'm like, dude, it's okay. And his eyes bulge out of his head, and he just goes, man, you're a different person. What happened to you? I mean, I've been meaning to ask you that, and I was like, my jaw dropped, because that when he said that, I realized I changed, because I didn't recognize it within me. So it's happening second nature. So it says, back to the book, he finally realized that he had undergone, look at this, a profound alteration in his reaction to life. That's what I'm talking about. Such a change could hardly have been brought about by himself alone. Very interesting. What often takes place in a few months could seldom have been accompanied by years of self-discipline. Think of all the self-discipline stuff you tried. Think of all the therapy you tried. Think of all the other things, outside entities you tried. There's churches and monasteries that have amazing groups you can go to. And the awakenings they might give you cost a lot of money, for one thing. but they also take a long time to happen, a long time. This is meant to happen, boom, right? So check this out. With a few exceptions, our members find they have tapped an unsuspected, or underline this, inner resource, not up here on the wall or up in the clouds, inner resource, which they presently identify with their own conception, interesting words, of a power greater than themselves, own conception. That's that own conception. We'll get more into this chapter, but when we get to Agnostics, but that's where the God of your understanding comes from, the aspect of it. And that's, you know, what Ebby said to Bill when Bill was struggling with, you know, old ideas of God. Choose your own conception of God, which is not an Oxford group idea, far from it. Most of us think this awareness of a power greater than ourselves is the essence of spiritual experience. Our more religious members call it God consciousness. So I'm going to put up a slide here, and I'll be putting up more slides from now on, a lot of them, which help people to understand this, my craziness a little more. All right. So the thing is if you look at this, it says, let's look at the spiritual experience part first. Desperation, hopelessness. This is the mindset of the guy when he starts. Desperation, hopelessness, terror, surrender. I'm dying. I can't get through this. I don't know what to do. I got nothing left. Results, spiritual experience when we do some type of surrender, or just happens. And sudden revolutionary change, immediate overwhelming God consciousness, followed at once by a vast change in feeling and outlook. Now, the spiritual awakening, willingness to believe, making a decision, taking action. Now, some people have had, you know, experiences right here, so they would be more over here, but this is the spiritual awakening. Action, results, spiritual awakening. Vast change in feeling and outlook develops slowly over a period of time. And look at the results. It's the same. Personality change sufficient to bring about recovery. Now, the one thing is with world's religions and everything like that, and I love it all. And I always say I'm all religions, yet I'm none. But we all have our different ways to the top of the mountain. You know, I mean, Eugene could hike up to the top, and Jeannie could hitchhike, and you know, Kitten could have a helicopter, I could have a car, you know, Annette could have a motorcycle, whatever. But here's the thing. When we get to the top, we might have different ways to get there and different outlooks, but we have the same view up on the top of the mountain. That's the most important thing. And that's what it says right here. It all leads to the same place, no matter which way you did it. So there's no exclusion of anything there. There's no exclusion, you know. So regardless of the type of psychic change you have, they change your perception and reactions to life and are vital for our ability to not only achieve, but grow and maintain sobriety. Very, very important. Excuse me. So this is, this next paragraph is one I actually used to use as a preamble, and I've used as a preamble before. Because it's so perfect. So it says most emphatically. Now, most emphatically means with utmost importance. So most emphatically, we should say that any alcoholic. Now, does that leave any of us out? You know, I don't think so. It says any alcoholic. Now look at this. There's a condition capable of honestly facing his problems and the life or experience can recover. So conditions will hit in this book. You have promises and conditions. You have results. You also have requirements sometimes, and you have must. But this is a condition. It's like a prerequisite, right? Capable of honestly facing, any alcoholic capable of honestly facing his problems and the life or experience can recover. Now, he got our attention. Right? So it's one more time, let's look at that. Capable of honestly facing his problems, life experience can recover. Again, it's like with Fred, we read last week. It does not say problem, it says problems, right? Meaning, this is not about drinking, drugging, and problem. Just, I mean, that's one of them. It means that's what we talk about. That's what we talk about a lot. We rarely talk about the other problems, our anger problem, our fear problem, our resentment problem, our sex problem, whatever it is, our God problem. We don't just have resentment, we have resentments. We don't have fear, we have fears. But the big question is, can you honestly face them? That's what he's saying to us here. I could honestly face, I could not honestly face my problem. I could honestly face your problems. I could tell you what's wrong with you. And usually I kept it to myself. I could, my family, I could tell them what their problems were. But are you ready to honestly face these problems? And all of them. And there's a condition. Are you willing to do it honestly? Honestly. They're talking, here we go with the self-honesty stuff. And the best definition for self-honesty, or honesty, period, is the awareness of where I am at. The awareness of where I'm at, being honest with myself. We all have that idea that what we're doing is wrong, but can we be honest with ourselves about it? Do I have a resentment? Do I not like this person? Do I have fear? Do I really have a God problem? Am I selfish? Do I have pride? Am I dishonest? So if I'm honest with myself, they tell me right here, I can recover, right? It does not say recovering. Notice that? It says recover. So recover means restored to health. It's the same thing as recovered. They both mean the same thing, health, restored, and all that. Yet people want to say, you can't be recovered. Always recovering. Recovering is a state one is in during a course of action of betterment, right? Or, for ours is 4 through 9, right? My health's being restored. I'm working on it. So let me give you a little story about that. So when I've had 5 back surgeries. My first back surgery was complete reconstructive of my back. 17 days in the hospital and all that stuff. Craziness. And I got the day after my surgery, this Marine guy comes into my room and says, all right, it's time to get out of bed. And that was the most painful experience of my life and the scariest one. And for the next 16 days, I was recovering. And then the next 40 days after that, through physical therapy, I was recovering. And then I became recovered from the surgery. I did not want to experience recovering ever again. I had to take the regimen of what I learned, physical therapy, going forward. Here's what's interesting. Recovered is in the big book 17 times. Recover 24 times. Recovering is in there twice. And it's in like the family afterwards, like don't bother your dad when he's recovering or something, right? I want to recover. I want to be restored to health. Why else would I come here? So if I'm honest with myself, I can recover. But what if I'm not honest with myself? Go to page 58. We read this a million times, or heard it a million times at least, it seems like. It says, those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves a simple program. Usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. Again, if you're honest, you can recover, right? I mean, it's plain as, the nose in your face. Or let's go back to where we were. So if I'm not honest, you're gonna have a rough road, a way rough road. So capable of honestly facing his problems and allowing our experience can recover. Now here's a condition, another condition. Provided he does not close his mind to all spiritual concepts. Provided he does not close his mind to all spiritual concepts, we can recover. Provided we do not close our mind Closed mind does not get fed. It's very important. It means you're not letting anything in if your mind is closed. We're not letting new ideas in. Open-minded means, it's a simple definition, to consider someone else's ideas and opinions other than, guess who? Yours, right? This is an open-minded program, right? So they're saying, be open-minded to the spiritual concepts. A good example of spiritual concept would be the steps. Maybe you're not open-minded to the, forgiving someone, letting go, or honesty, or confession, step 5, amends, being altruistic. So I use old school words with a lot of those because they're old. A lot of people go, I don't want to be religious, but I do 6 and 7. Well, 6 and 7 has an element of forgiveness in there. I don't want to hear about, I'll never do confession, but I'll do step 4. It is confession in a sense, in a small sense. But amends, restitution, all those words, they're saying here, don't be a hater of spiritual ideas, because the steps are spiritual ideas, but also don't be a hater of religion or philosophy or another's religion. Your way isn't the only way. Your ladder to God isn't the only ladder to God. Don't tip over another person's ladder because they're not doing it right. That's the thing they're saying here too. A lot of people will do that. I know guys who are book thumpers that know us really well, but they treat people like garbage. That, my way is the only way. And we talked last night, and we have a group called All Spiritual Concepts we have every Sunday night. And we had what part of the thing we talked about last night was spiritual ego. And people were like, there's no spiritual ego. Oh, yes, there is. Yes, there is, so that was very interesting. So, there are many ways, again, to the top of that mountain, and that's what, that's what they're saying there again. Don't kick out someone's ladder from underneath them, and if you have a concept of religion, if you're closed-minded against other concepts, those steps will be very, the steps will be very difficult for you, because they're saying be open-minded. I will tell you, when you're open-minded to all spiritual concepts, it's electric, and you become more open-minded, especially when you do the steps, and especially you have a spiritual awakening, spiritual experience. Remember when Fred became open-minded, quite as important, he said, was a discovery that spiritual principles, 4 through 9, could solve all my problems. That's what he said, all. Let's go back to the book. He says, you can only be defeated by an attitude of intolerance and belligerent denial. So intolerance means unwillingness to recognize, differences in opinions or beliefs. Belligerent denial is to be forcefully angry or refuse to accept, something as the truth. So ask yourself, do you have intolerance, with this stuff, or belligerent denial? Right now, do you have it? See what else it says here. He says, we find that no one have difficulty with the spirituality of the program, right? People say, I'm going to go do the spiritual part of the program. I'm like, okay, which steps are the spiritual part? Because they're all spiritual. Especially the first step. People will say, oh, this first step's the only step that's not spiritual. Anything you're doing when you discover you're powerless, unless you want to stay there, is going to lead you to a new aspect of seeking power. They're all spiritual. So look at this. Willingness, honesty, and open-mindedness are essentials of recovery, but these are indispensable. So what do those words mean? We kind of hit some of them already. We'll go deeper on these a little bit. Willingness, honesty, and they're conditions for conditions for recovery. So willingness means to do something, to be ready, be ready to do something. It's only demonstrated by action. It's the true willingness is demonstrated by action. And so honesty, as I said a minute ago, the awareness of where I'm at, it's the self-honesty. Am I powerless over alcohol, or can I control it? You know, is my life consumed by resentment, or do I blame others? You know, and does, you know, fear drive, you know, does pride, you know, drive my decisions in life? Stuff like that. You know, but here's the thing, you know, can I run my life, or do I need something greater than myself to do it? And but then you can go deeper, you know, as you go deeper, self-honesty questions, and you go down the spiritual path, you come to questions like, who am I, and why am I here? Am I willing to let go of my old self, my old ideas? Am I willing to accept new terms to live by? You know, how should I live this life? What do I want to do with this life? Stuff like that. Open-mindedness, as I said, is to consider someone's opinion other than your own. Can you consider another person's opinion? You know, keep your mind open and let the process take you. You know, and then the word essentials, it means necessary, something that's vital for us to have, necessary. If you know, it's kind of like this, if you lose a lot of blood, well, it's essential that you get a blood transfusion because you're not going to make it. It's necessary. So what they're saying here is being ready, knowing where I'm at, and to consider another person's opinion other than my own are absolutely necessary to be restored to health. So being ready, knowing where I'm at, and to consider someone's opinion other than my own is absolutely necessary to be restored to health. So so as simple as that. Next paragraph down. And this is by Herbert Spencer. You know, a lot of people, I don't know, I've been to a lot of big book discussion meetings, you know, where everyone reads out of the big book and talks. And for some reason, no one ever wants to talk about or describe this. I don't think no one really wants to, but let's look at it here. There is a principle which is bar against all information, which is proof to keep all argument, proof against all arguments, which will not fail to keep a man in everlasting ignorance. That means lack of knowledge. That principle is contempt prior to investigation. What they're saying here is people will write out something as not working without ever even experiencing it or even trying it, right? You know, what that is, you know, is making a decision based on theory rather than fact. Oh, this thing is, these steps don't work. And you know, you never even, you know, we love condemning things, you know, we don't know nothing about. We love theories. So what is a theory? A theory is an accepted belief that you do not know because you have not experienced it. Remember I said a minute ago, anything in life you know is from experiencing, everything else is a theory. And how many decisions have you made based on theory? Drawing conclusions that are based on theory, condemning something even though you've never experienced it. You know, did any of you ever do that with God? Contempt prior to investigation. So before we get into the chapter of the agnostics, which we're not going to do today, but all this is kind of prep work for this adventure. It's important to know what words atheist, agnostic mean. And to do that, I'm going to put up something that's called a faith index. Because these words are big words and a lot of misinformation. I'm not saying that this is all right information, but this is the best of my ability. So it's important to know what these words mean, the atheist, agnostic, and all that, especially since the chapter is called We Agnostics. So I'm just going to explain what this thing looks like first. At the top of it, you have a person's belief. You have the decision that sprung into from the belief, decision to action, results, growth, knows, right? Knows. So let's look at the atheist first. So the A on atheist is a prefix for the word not. You take away the A, you get the word theist. But atheist is one who rejects religious or spiritual concepts, beliefs, and denies the existence of God. They try to prove God doesn't exist. An atheist does not have a affirmative belief that there is no God. They simply reject the idea. They made a mental conviction without proof. And if you look at it, what's interesting here is, can an atheist experience the steps? Can an atheist have transformation if they make a decision in 249? Absolutely. Anyone can have an experience with the steps. Now the gray areas here is, I met people who claim they're atheists, who do the steps, and I ask them, they're card carrying atheists, and I'm looking for happiness and this and this. And I'm like going, it's the same thing. They discover something, they just don't call it God. And most people, you gotta remember, most people looking for God never call it God. Now, I know people that are atheists that don't even get past any of that on there. They don't even get past it. And they don't make a decision or take action. Let's put the question marks up there, because something can happen. Something can happen. So the next one is the theist. The theist only believes. Only believes. So believe means to trust and have confidence that in the existence of God, or is real. Just that God's true and real. So the theist, all they do is believe, right? So they do not make a decision. They do not take action. They don't get results. They don't know, right? So there's no action, no results, no growth. And a belief, no matter how sincere, if not followed by action, is not enough. It's just a belief. So believing is very similar to theory, as you have not experienced something. And it falls into the category of not knowing. So you don't need proof to believe in anything. So if a believer were to honestly to define their relationship with God, they would call it deep admiration. And most people just want to have, that's good enough for them, deep admiration and love for God. And where's that God? Out here. They love, they just don't know. So belief, no matter how sincere, if not followed by action, is not enough. So they have, again, just like they have a mental conviction without proof, just like the atheist. Is a belief in God sufficient for long-term recovery? No, I just described that. Is a belief in God sufficient to begin our journey? Yes. Some people don't have to believe in anything to start the journey, right? And so the theist is just the believer, right? Saying you believe that God is true, real, is not going to give you psychic change, what we talked about in the last 45 minutes. It might give you a psychic change, but not an entire psychic change. Like, here's a good analogy. Out here in Texas, and we have the largest largemouth mouth in the world. They're 22 pounds, 25 inches, 30 inches long. They're monsters. They're huge. Nothing like them in the world. You can take my word for it and believe in the fish based on my testimony, or you can go around and tell your friends about, my friend caught this fish, and that's just your belief. Or you can come with me to Texas and we can experience the fish and take it out, and you can know what it's like to do that and go beyond belief to knowing. That's the question is, what's more important, belief or knowledge? Most people will say belief. right away because it's some more familiar territory. Let's see. Let's look at the agnostic. So again, the A means no, it means not. So agnostic denies the existence of God based on like unsatisfactory, insufficient evidence. They do not deny that God might exist. They just want proof. They really don't believe or disbelieve. They're just, I guess the word's like unsure, skeptic, doubtful about it. They cannot confirm or deny God, but they don't just approve it necessarily either. To them, God is just unknown. Uncertain claims from lack of knowledge, from lack of knowing, uncertain claims. It falls in the category of not knowing. And I think most of us were agnostic at some time. You know, most of us, a lot of us were the believer. I mean, if you look at just the back to the believer really quick, there's a church out here that has 7,000 people a weekend there, and there's a lot of believers in there. But that's good. That's great for them. But we must go deeper. And this there's a lot of people that are agnostic. But if you look at this agnostic, maybe they do start to believe. Maybe they just decide to make the decision, action, results, growth, knows. That's where I was. I just made a decision. I made a decision to do the steps. If that makes sense. The thing is just like the two others, they have mental conviction without certain proof. There's a great story called the Agnostic Goldfish, and let's just say Kicken and I are to two fish and we're swimming in water, and we're just going about our day, and we swim by Don Goldfish and we say, "Hey Don, what's up?" And he says, "Ain't the water beautiful?" And I go back to Kick and I go, "Hey, let's go find the water." We're in the water. And that was like me, as I was like a fish, swimming upstream looking for water. There's no difference between an atheist believer and, the atheist, the theist, and the agnostic, and it comes down to it. None of them take action. None of them get results. They're not, they don't know. Some might take action, but they all made the mental conviction without certain proof. And now we get to the Gnostic. It's a big word. A lot of people, I heard the word agnostic before, but I never heard the word Gnostic before. And it's funny because it's derivative. It's the original word. The A was thrown in there for people, to not. So this means to go beyond believing and gain a spiritual understanding of knowing God. And that's a result of that spiritual conversion, psychic change. So they are spiritually awakened. They know God exists because they've experienced God. And once you know, the light is on, you can't turn it off. It's very simple. They believe, or maybe they don't. Maybe they start off here, but they could stop at any of these. But this person is going to make a decision. They're going to take action. They're going to have that conversion, or psychic change, whatever word you want to call it, spiritual progress and growth, and knows God. And the knowing God happens all through here, not just at the end, but they know. They know. And we get caught up reading heavily about God from others. We listen to testimony about God. There's a fundamental difference between knowing about God and knowing God. Do you want to know God, or do you want to know about God? Knowing God is experiencing God. And then it's engaging in personal relationship with what you call that. Personal relationship. So as you can see on the chart, knowing isn't something you do at night when no one notices. It's a 24-hour-a-day life. It is life. It's just the life we didn't know was there. Knowing God requires involvement, participation, commitment. Being Gnostic is more something you don't do this or don't do that. It's more like, it's more than reading. It's more than acting spiritual. It's a way of life. It's who you are. In other words, knowing God is a spiritual life, because when you plug into this God, we're really plugging into ourselves, but we plug into a source of life where we receive what this book talks about: strength, inspiration, guidance, direction. You know, and the more we know God, the more we know what hope, peace, joy, happiness. We're free, you know, freedom. There's very different than knowing about God. I know God not because I knew about God or I read a bunch of books. I know about God because I experienced God. Just like, you know, I did not know, you know, Kickin before, and I knew about her, but then I talked to her and I experienced her. I know her because I've experienced her, and I know, you know, I spent time, you know. And there's a great story I remember hearing, and it's called the Mango Story. And I went to this guy, Wayne Dyer, years ago to see him live, and he was talking about knowing God and experiencing God. He was really trying to get down to the brass tacks of it. And it was beautiful. And what he did was he asked, is anyone in the room that does not know what a mango tastes like? And a couple people actually raised their hands. So they brought them up front, and then they brought 10 people from the audience, and they put them in soundproof rooms, and one by one they came out and they whispered in the person's ear what a mango tastes like. And then they came out again and told the person what a mango tastes like. Then they gave the person a mango. And the person was nothing like what the other people have said, right? And just like we, you know, you cannot know what a mango tastes like unless we had the experience. You cannot know what God tastes like without having an experience of God. We cannot know God on the testimony of another person. There's an old saying that a dog that does not see, you know, the rabbit eventually abandons the chase, because they get doubt. And what that means is, imagine there's a rabbit running around my neighborhood and my dog gets out and chases the rabbit. And then the rabbit gets away, but my dog keeps running around the block. All of a sudden there's 10 dogs behind my dog, but none of them saw the rabbit. Eventually they go, what the hell is this dog doing? And they all leave, but my dog keeps running around looking for that rabbit. You know, we're the same. If we keep chasing God based on testimony of another person, we'll abandon the chase. You know, I mean, do you gain an experience of riding a bike by watching another person ride a bike? No, you got to have conscious contact with the bicycle. You hop on. My son, we had a condition. He's 8 years old, did not know how to ride a bike very well. He wanted a bike for Christmas. I said, you need to go out and ride it. I can't ride a bike. I said, go out there and learn. And he did. He made conscious contact with the bike. We must make effort to have conscious contact with God. And once you establish that, you no longer experience doubt. Matter of fact, you strive to grow on every spiritual level. One more thing, when knowing confronts a belief, knowing will always triumph, because beliefs come from outside of us. Think about knowing comes from within. You know, being a believer does not cost you anything. Think about that. It doesn't cost me a dime to be a believer. Maybe if I go to church, you know, but there's no sacrifice to make. There's, you know, growing, knowing God costs something. So before you say, I want to know God, be sure you understand it's going to cost you something. You would have to be willing to let something go. You have to be willing to look at your instincts and look at your resentments and look at your fears. And one more thing, you know, a lot of people are reluctant to give that stuff up. That's standing in the way between them and God. You know, I'm going to close this up. You know, there's an old joke I remember hearing about the atheist agnostic, and this girl's pregnant, and the believer walks up to her and says, it says, oh, I know the sex, I know the hair color, and I know the personality of your baby. The atheist denies there's no baby. The agnostic assumes the pregnancy, but honestly doesn't know for sure. And the Gnostic says you're pregnant. I mean, it says you're pregnant. So it's kind of like that, you know. But look at step 2. We're going to close with that today, just dissect it a little bit. It says, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves can restore us to sanity. Came to believe happens later on. Power is the ability to direct the course of events, to make something happen. It also means to possess internal strength. It comes from a Latin word called patri, which means to be able. Means to be able. Think about that. Belief, as we mentioned already, it's an old German word. It means to hold with trust, to believe something's real. Power greater than ourselves means to have a power greater than you currently possess. And some people call that higher power, supreme being, God, whatever you want to call it. Call it whatever you want. But look at the last words in there. This is where people don't grasp, is the word restore. It means bring something back and return to the original condition. You watch like there's a show on A&E called American Restoration, and the guy takes like an old Coke machine that's been destroyed and returns it to its original condition. And they always go, man, that looks like it was when I was a kid. What do you think happens to us? The same thing. We get restored to our original condition. Pretty interesting. Because, you know, sanity means soundness of mind. It's that wholeness, complete. So insanity must mean unsoundness of mind. And that's, you know, not whole. It means we're missing something. Or I like to say something's unfinished, something's not, I haven't found something yet. So, you know, sanity doesn't get returned by simply choosing to believe that a power can restore you to sanity. If we could do that, it would be a 2-step program and we would be done. We've done today. Step 2 is not just coming to believe in the power greater than ourselves. It's about the nature. It also can be about the nature of your insanity a little bit too. I mean, a lot of people come to this program, oh, I got God, I'm cool with God, but I hate my wife, I hate my family, I hate my job, I hate all these people. That doesn't sound like a person that's sane. So really, I mean, look at your nature of your sanity there too. You know, what is it? What is it? You know, it's, you know, what's the nature of your insanity? Resentment, fear, you know, is it driven by high and low self-esteem, pride? So you cannot overcome it on your own. You need steps 4 through 9 to do so. Right? 4 through 9 is the solution. You know, many sit at meetings in the condition of that insanity. Let's go to page. So, well, like I said, it will only be a 2-step program. Let's go to page 84 real quick. I'm going to show you guys one of those secrets, as I call it. This book has a lot of those in it. So page 84 says, and we have seeds fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol. For this time, sanity has returned. Now, we're starting off next week on page 44 into step 2, right? This is page 84. That's 40 pages from where we're at. 40 pages of directions and work, inventory, discussing with another, letting stuff go, making amends, doing step 10 repeatedly, repeatedly, repeatedly. You notice where it says restore to sanity? Step 10. Yet people do 4 through 9 one time and then they don't understand why they're not getting the program. You know, notice it says could restore us to sanity. Could means believing something can happen Step 10 is where this happens. Along with, remember, we're doing 9 at the same time. We're hopefully doing 11, and hopefully getting into altruistic sponsoring. So step 2 basically is like a street sign that says go our way. Basically, you need power. It's about hope. It's a mirror of step 1, powerless power, unmanageability, sanity. You know, you can have a different life. And is my belief system working? You need power. Has my ideas of God work? Do they work? Or do my unbelieving ideas of God, where has that got me? So to cover step 2, we're going to look into a chapter called We Agnostics. And this chapter, you know, that chapter for me was a big game changer. If I had a person taking me through it that was not thorough on specific items in there, I can honestly tell you, I probably wouldn't be sitting here, because I needed a new idea of God, and I was a tough nut to crack, you know, on the God thing. And, you know, there's a saying in recovery, there's a wrench for every nut. And this chapter is a wrench for me, because I needed it. And it's the same doing a book study. I'm going to do my best to be thorough and specific on things. I'm not saying they're right or wrong or anything like that. I'm going to be as specific as possible to try to get people to understand. So I can explain God, you know, so God can be heard on a simple spiritual level for anyone's spiritual level. And you got to remember, the most controversial subject in the history of man is God. So don't miss next week. So I'm going to stop the recording. So next week we'll begin with agnostics.